Wow. Just when critics thought the story surrounding the Duke and Duchess of Sussex could not take another dramatic turn, Australia delivers a headline that is sending waves across veteran communities, royal watchers, and Invictus supporters around the globe. In a moment that feels both symbolic and deeply emotional, Australian Veterans Affairs Minister Matt Keogh has officially announced the reinstatement of funding for Invictus Australia, and the reaction has been immediate, passionate, and incredibly powerful.
We're providing another 3 years of funding to Invictus Australia. So the Albanese government's establishing a new Veterans and Families Wellbeing Agency, and this implements one of the recommendations of the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. And as part of establishing the new Veterans and Families Wellbeing Agency, we're transitioning funding for broader wellbeing support to the veteran community to that new agency. And as we transition to having the new Veterans and Family Wellbeing Agency set up, in order to maintain continuity and certainty of support services for our veteran community, we're providing another 3 years of funding to Invictus Australia.
For supporters of Prince Harry and the Invictus movement, this is not merely a political update. This feels personal. This feels like recognition. This feels like a statement that the mission behind Invictus still matters profoundly in a world hungry for healing, courage, and human connection. And honestly, the timing could not have been more remarkable. Because for years now, Prince Harry has faced an avalanche of criticism from commentators, social media outrage merchants, royal traditionalists, and tabloid personalities who repeatedly attempted to diminish the significance of his work. Again and again, voices tried to reduce Invictus to a publicity exercise. Again and again, skeptics questioned whether the movement still held influence. Yet here comes Australia with a thunderous answer that changes the entire atmosphere surrounding the conversation. Funding reinstated. Support restored. Commitment renewed. That is not a collapse. That is not failure. That is endurance. And suddenly, the narrative so many critics tried to push begins falling apart in real time. Because the truth about the Invictus Games has always been much bigger than palace politics, online arguments, or royal gossip. At its core, Invictus is about wounded veterans reclaiming identity after trauma. It is about recovery after unimaginable sacrifice. It is about individuals who endured physical injuries, invisible wounds, devastating emotional battles, and the painful challenge of rebuilding life after service. Prince Harry understood that long before many others did. People often forget where the idea truly came from. The Duke of Sussex was deeply affected after witnessing the struggles faced by injured servicemen and women returning from conflict zones. He saw firsthand how isolation, depression, loss of purpose, and emotional trauma could consume veterans once public attention faded. And instead of merely talking about it, he created something transformative. The Invictus Games were born from empathy, action, and determination. The word Invictus itself means unconquered, unbroken, undefeated. And that spirit became the heartbeat of the entire movement. From the very beginning, the Games were never simply about medals or ceremonies. They became a platform for recovery through sport, camaraderie, and dignity. Veterans who once felt forgotten suddenly stood before cheering crowds. Families devastated by hardship discovered hope again. Competitors from around the world connected through shared resilience rather than shared suffering. That emotional impact cannot be manufactured. It cannot be faked for cameras. And it certainly cannot survive for years globally if it lacks authenticity. Which is exactly why this latest development from Australia carries such emotional weight. The reinstatement of funding for Invictus Australia sends a message far beyond finances. It tells veterans that their stories still matter, It tells supporters that the movement still commands respect. And perhaps most importantly, it confirms that Prince Harry's vision continues to inspire institutions and governments, despite relentless criticism directed toward him personally. That is what makes this moment so fascinating.
Because there has been a determined effort in some corners to portray Harry as isolated, irrelevant, or disconnected from meaningful impact. Yet every time Invictus appears on the world stage, something extraordinary happens. Veterans speak emotionally about the difference it made in their lives. Families describe finding renewed strength. Communities unite around compassion rather than division. And no amount of negativity can erase those testimonies. The emotional power behind Invictus has always overwhelmed the noise. That is why supporters are celebrating this Australian decision with such enthusiasm. It feels validating. It feels hopeful. It feels like proof that substance ultimately outlasts sensationalism. And there is another reason this news matters so deeply. Australia has long shared a strong connection with the Invictus spirit. The nation's veterans community has shown incredible passion for the Games over the years. Australians understand military sacrifice intimately, and the emotional response to wounded servicemen and women resonates strongly across the country. So when Minister Matt Keogh announced the restoration of funding, many interpreted it as a reaffirmation of values that transcend politics entirely. Respect, service, recovery, human resilience. Those ideals are at the very center of Invictus. Invictus is not surviving because of royal titles. It is surviving because it changes lives. That distinction matters tremendously. And now, with Australia reaffirming support through restored funding, the movement enters another chapter with renewed momentum and optimism. For veterans participating in future programs, this news could mean expanded opportunities, enhanced resources, and continued access to transformative community experiences. For families, it could mean hope. For supporters, it feels like vindication. And for Prince Harry, it undoubtedly represents a deeply meaningful reminder that the mission he started continues inspiring belief around the world. That is powerful, very powerful. Because in an era dominated by division, cynicism, and constant online hostility, stories centered around resilience and healing feel increasingly rare and valuable. Invictus offers exactly that. A reminder that courage does not end when soldiers leave the battlefield. A reminder that recovery deserves celebration. A reminder that compassion can create extraordinary transformation. And perhaps most importantly, a reminder that even amid relentless criticism, meaningful work still speaks louder than noise. So tonight, supporters across Australia and beyond are celebrating not merely a political decision, but a renewed commitment to wounded veterans and the extraordinary community built around them. And as applause continues pouring in for Minister Matt Keogh's announcement, one thing becomes impossible to deny. The Invictus spirit remains alive, resilient, and deeply inspiring, just as Prince Harry intended from the very beginning.